Yo, what's up everybody? Today I'm coming at you with a little bit different of content. Today I'm coming at you with a little bit of a longer form video because this subject itself requires more than just 3 minutes for a TikTok or a reel. And also I am trying to build a little bit more of a platform over here on YouTube because it's just suited more towards me, to be honest. I don't like to rush, scroll, boom, boom, boom. I don't like to do that very often. I like to take my time, have a little tea, a little mug of tea, or maybe a little bit of coffee. Shout out to Feel Good Coffee. And I like to watch a YouTube video. I like to watch a 15-20 minute video minimum. That's typically how I like to roll. So what we're gonna do today is I'm gonna try to aim for this video to be around 15 to 20 minutes. But it is what it is, you know. If it goes too long, I can just edit some, whatever, you know. I like to edit videos. Also, I'm an editor. I like to edit videos, so if you need a video edited, shout me out, okay? Send me a message on TikTok or Instagram, shout me out. I'll shout you back. So, the topic today is the Ušumgal. You're thinking, what's that? The Ušumgal is Sumerian lore, I guess, you know, religion, mythology. Oh, and if you want to know, yeah, I am a gummy deep right now, okay? Just so I could give you guys a fun, awesome video, because I like it. So, Ušumgal, what does it translate to? It translates to the great serpent, the big serpent, the dragon even. So even back in Sumerian myth, Sumerian, the first civilization, was it really the first civilization? Probably not, you know. That's mainstream history. There's probably something going on that we don't know about anyway. And let alone that, you know, there's things that go back like Tepe that clearly show some sort of organized structure of some sort, you know, so that has to be some sort of civilization or congregation. But within mainstream history, Sumerians, they are the first civilization, the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia, ancient Mesopotamia. So even back in Sumerian mythology, the very first civilization, dragons are seen. They're making an appearance. They're there. Dragons are there. So that is deeply embedded in the collective consciousness, you know, deep in our subliminal subconscious mind. So what does the Ušumgal, what do they represent? The Ušumgal represents higher knowledge, higher frequencies of information, higher dimensional awareness. Basically, if you want to put it into an analogy, probably like someone like Zechariah Sitchin would. Maybe he did. I don't know exactly. But what the role of an Ušumgal represents is basically if you see a UFO lands right in front of you, and out steps an alien. When you approach that UFO, you must talk to that alien first before you can get on the ship. That's basically what an Ušumgal is. It is the gateway between earth and heaven, even if you want to look at it that way, before you get up to the, you know, divine squad, you know? So that's what an Ušumgal is. He's the messenger of higher information and he is the gateway. So in this video, I want to talk about the Ušumgal and their role in humanity, quote unquote, within the Sumerian myth. And I want to talk about one in particular, and that myth is the myth of Adapa. So Adapa in Sumerian, and you know, this story came out in Sumer, assumingly, because it takes place in Eridu. Eridu is the first city ever, and it was formed as the first city in Sumer as well. So it's the first city ever. So assuming if this story takes place in Eridu, then it was probably formed in Sumerian times, you know. But this story was told all throughout Babylonian, Akkadian, you know. It gets a little muddy when you start thinking of Sumerian stories because they might have roots in Sumer. They were started in Sumer, but they just traveled along the time down to Babylon, down to Akkad, because Sumer was so influential in its time that it, you know, everybody else told the stories for hundreds and thousands, literally thousands of years after. So in this Sumerian story of the myth of Adapa, Adapa is the first human, essentially. He is the perfect human specimen, and he is the son or product creation of Enki. Enki is the Sumerian water deity, creation deity. Water is creation because water creates life. A planet can't have life unless it has water on it, you know, that's what they say. So water is creation, water is the fundamental, right? So Adapa was, in the story, was fishing, and I'm going to get into the fish topic later, so this is just to remind myself. But Adapa was fishing along the river of I think it was the Euphrates. So he's fishing down the river in his simple little canoe. He is the first human. He is a wise man. He is a sage from Eridu. He's sailing in his boat, and the wind capsizes his boat, pushes him into the water. And he got so dang mad, he got so dang furious that he cursed the south wind. That's what it was called, the south wind. What does that mean technically? I don't know. If you want to get into my perception of it, south means lower. So the south wind disrupted his emotions, giving him lower emotions of anger. You know, that's how I see it. I don't know what they say, you know? So the south wind capsizes Adapa's boat, making him mad. He then curses the south wind with his voice. Only with his voice was he able to break the wings of the south wind. So he straight up dispelled the wind. He dispelled air around him, you know, as the myth goes. Only using his voice, which is showing the prominence of your voice and how powerful it is as a spell every time you speak. So this applies to me as well, because I can speak angrily when I'm driving very easily, okay? So I'm Adapa breaking the south wind. I gotta quit it. So Adapa breaks the south wind. What does Anu? Anu is the father of Enki. Enki is the lord of the earth. He is the god designated to earth and all of humanity because he is water, right? And he created humans. So the father of Enki is Anu. Anu is the sky god. U is in Anunnaki. It's sky. That's what it means. Sky. Sky is essentially God. So Anu says, who broke the south wind? Who's down on earth breaking the south wind? I let that wind rip. Don't be breaking my south wind. That was my breakfast. So he contacts Enki. Enki says, oh, that was Adapa. Hey. Anu says to Enki, why does Adapa know how to break the south wind? He's a human. He should not know that divinity within him. Actually, he shouldn't even have that divinity because you didn't tell me that he had that divinity. So Enki says, hey, I'll bring him to you, okay? Just don't worry about it. So Enki rallies to Adapa, goes to Adapa and says, hey, you have a meeting with Anu. Good luck. When you get to see Anu, you will have things offered to you. Adapa was forced to wear oils and maybe some sort of particular garment to approach Anu. And then after that, he were to have to accept the bread and the water that was offered to him by Anu. And Enki says, hey, that bread and that water is the bread and water of death. You eat that bread and you drink that water, you're in trouble. You're dead. You will die. Adapa says, yeah, I'll avoid the bread and the water, okay? But I will put on the oil and the garments. When he gets there, he sees a god named Ningishzida. And I will speak more on this god later on as well. But Ningishzida is basically the god that he had to get to walk past to get into the throne room of Anu, if you want to visualize it that way. So Ningishzida was the gateway, the path blocker and the path inhibitor to Anu, which is divine crown royalty, the pinnacle of source God creation, essentially, right? So Adapa does not eat or drink the offerings of Anu. So in reality, that bread and that water was not the bread and water of death. Technically, it was the bread and water of eternal life. So essentially, the mortal self of Adapa would have died when having the bread and the water. So we're going to get into, I guess we can go ahead, I'll go ahead and talk about what I feel about the story as well. So that means to me, Enki is the Lord of the earth, right? That's what it translates to. Lord of the earth, God of this realm, essentially, if you want to look at it that way. He is water. Without water, earth is nothing, so he is the way of life. He tricks Adapa into not eating and getting immortality, because then that would offset the balance, the cosmic balance of human experience, right? Because, and I'll get into this more later, but you have to experience, as awareness, in order to expand, you know? You don't just expand. Source just expands indefinitely by funneling itself outward like a torus field, you know, if you want to think of it that way as well. It's feeding on itself because it's creating loops like the human experience in order to expand and spread outwards, funneling. So if Adapa would have eaten the immortality bread, then his role as a human ultimately would have been forced into nothing. He wouldn't have had a role as a human, so he couldn't expand. He would have already, there would be no expansion, there would be no experience without it. And we need an experience in order to expand. So Enki, essentially, in that case, was an Ušumgal because he was the gateway information between Anu, the highest realm, you know, the highest divinity, crown, and earth, human. So Enki is the dragon serpent of knowledge. He's also Prometheus. He's also Lucifer in the Bible. But that's definitely for another video. So he is the transmitter of higher frequencies, higher knowledge. So that's the story ultimately of Adapa that condensed down into my form, just so we're not here all day, you know? So how does Adapa translate into, it can translate into multiple different things. But we're gonna use the Ušumgal as an archetype, as a reference for the Bible now. Did you guess it? So the snake in the garden. So I talked about a god earlier in Sumerian pantheon called Ningish-Zeta. That translates to the Lord of the good tree. So Ningish-Zeta is also an Ušumgal because he is often depicted with serpents going up in a caduceus. He actually is responsible, quote unquote, you know, Sumerians I guess are responsible. But maybe it's something that goes further back into the collective, and even the Sumerians were just able to tap into this some sort of sacred, innate human knowledge, human essence knowledge. So Ningish-Zeta is the snakes coiling up the tree. What's that sound like? And he's also an Ušumgal, so he's basically an usher of higher dimensional frequency knowledge, funneling it into the human, giving it to the human experience, right? So the Bible came after Sumerian tablets by thousands of years, you know? Like, that's just a simple fact. So with that simple fact, we have to then progress from that and say, okay, so the Bible was heavily influenced by the big, grand, epic myths that came before it, like the Gilgamesh story, the Great Flood, and all of these other Sumerian tablets that came before it. This is what they were inspired, that it was inspired by. So this is earlier, it came first. So the serpent as a whole, and we'll, you know, with the Bible and all, but as a whole, what I see the serpent as, I'll just say that, what I see it as, it symbolizes the human's necessary existence and its innate humanly, but cosmically, divinity. Cosmic divinity. So like the Kundalini in the, you know, the Eastern views and Western views of the snake are very different, but the Kundalini, you know, is a symbol, a way of speaking how the snake is the innate energy force of a human, but it also translates cosmically because we are one and the same. You are the world, you are outer space, you are everything, because it all is within here first. So that means if it's in here, then whatever you're seeing, you know, in the external funneled out is also you. It has to be, because it's coming from within first. So serpent, higher knowledge through experience, through awareness. That's the serpent. So we go source, dragon, human, or snake. Snake is like the human form of a dragon. Dragon is cosmic. Ušumgal, right? Great serpent. Not just serpent, it's the great serpent. It's dragon, which is the macro form of the snake. It's the cosmic snake. It's cosmic, higher intelligence divinity, innately. So the snake is the human form, the micro form of the dragon. In ancient Japan, traditional Japan stories, I have a tattoo of the koi fish. I wish I could show you, but I don't have the shirt on for it right now. The koi fish swims up the waterfall in order to then turn into a dragon. And we're going to get into fish later. I already mentioned that. But so the fish turns to the dragon. And what's the waterfall? Existence. Through awareness, the fish lives and turns into the dragon if it can make it up the waterfall. It's obviously symbolism for the chakras going up the spine, you know, symbolism of the snake coiling up It's all the same story, but it's translated in different ways, and I really resonate with that. So the fish is the human, right? And relates to the Japanese story in Japan. The koi fish is the human. The dragon is the cosmic snake, the cosmic fish, the higher knowledge, and then you have source, right? So source, dragon, snake. So these old medieval stories you see of people saying they slayed the dragons. Notice that old stories, super ancient stories, the dragons were all seen as powerful, wise, fierce, or, shocking in ways, just, whoa. But they could be scary, I guess, in that way, but they weren't murdering people. They weren't destroying anybody. They were transmissions to higher knowledge. But in medieval times, you get to around that point, it becomes the normal, especially in England and such, to slay the dragon. Why are you slaying the dragon, this celestial form of knowledge? And as deep as I can go pretty deep into it, but obviously that's not timely for this video. So if you want to know more about the slaying of the dragon, I can make a video about that because it's something I'm passionate about. So we're not cutting off our spiritual connection here. We're befriending the dragons. We're not slaying our dragons. So your connection to a dragon, if you've been connected to dragons, if you've wanted a dragon tattoo, or since you were a kid you like dragons or whatever, that could be a sign connection to higher knowledge. I've always had dreams of being abducted, quote unquote, not really abducted, but just visited by UFOs and by aliens in person as well. In my dreams, I've seen aliens face to face. I've been on their ships before. I've been in the cockpit and I saw Earth down below in this big ship. So that to me is also a way to see a connection to higher frequencies. It's a translation, and you can only the mind runs off symbols. So that's why all these ancient mythologies and these stories are so filled with symbolism, because that's how it works in the brain. That's how it stays in the brain. A story helps understand information in a streamlined way, if you do it right. Not no Disney story nowadays. We're not talking about no Netflix story either. So, dragon, higher knowledge, befriend the dragons, Ušumgal. So if we talk about the Bible, the snake in the Bible, let's just start there. Genesis is really interesting. I'm not trying to crap on it at all. It's really interesting how much of it is just not original. It might just be, it's an original topic from someone else, and then maybe they'll flip one detail and then just put it in there, And it is what it is, because that's just how influential these Sumerians were. But no one talks about the Sumerians. Everyone talks about the Bible, even though the Bible was worshiping the Sumerian storytelling way, essentially, and ripping its work, copying his homework. So the snake in the Bible, it's the Enki archetype. The snake in the Bible is the Enki archetype, and that's why I said earlier the Enki is essentially Lucifer in a way. It's the same thing, the snake, Lucifer, but it's for another video. Ningish Zeta is also kind of the archetype of the snake as well in ways. It also, since the tree, the snake is in the tree, like Ningish Zeta is a snake in a tree. That's pretty cool. But the snake in the Bible told Adam and Eve that if they eat this fruit, that they will surely not die, and they will become like gods, knowing good and evil. Okay, does that sound familiar? That sounds a little bit like the Adapa story to me, only flipped in a way. So in this story, the snake is still forcing higher knowledge onto Adam and Eve, right? Adapa, Adam, whoa. He's still, the snake is still forcing, not forcing like, but like forcing is in like, he's presenting the awareness and they take it, they go down that route. He's forcing a spiritual awakening, the realization of good and evil, which is duality, and I'm not saying duality isn't real, but duality is the illusion of separation. And without duality, how can you expand? If you know all is, then how can you keep, learning? So you have to funnel down through an illusion of duality in order to not remember, so that you can learn again. You'd be separation. You have to go wade through the separation in order to find the oneness within everything. So the snake presented the apple and forced them through a spiritual awakening through the human experience, through the dualistic awareness. Okay. Enki told Adapa not to eat the fruit. That's very interesting. Let's compare Adapa and the Bible. Very interesting. So in the Bible, God told Adam and Eve not to eat the fruit of good and evil, right? Knowledge. In Adapa, in the story of Adapa, Enki told Adapa not to eat the fruit to stay alive. So they're both saying, do not eat the fruit to stay alive. Both of them are saying that. Is Enki Yahweh? It's just a rip story. It doesn't mean that Yahweh is just Enki, because, that's taking it as literal. If you take it as literal and you say that all the God, God is Yahweh, and that's a real fallen angel, and then, that's just conspiracies, and that gets to, it's all symbolism, okay? So, next point. God tricks humans to stay perfect. He wants them to stay perfect in the Garden of Eden, immortal, not mortal humans. They are just simply awareness, essentially. They're essentially perfect. So God is tricking humans to stay perfect and not fall into mortal dualistic awareness. In Adapa, Enki tricks humans to stay imperfect, mortal. Interesting. You might think, oh, what the heck, Enki? What the heck, bro? I want to be immortal. Well, I don't, first of all. But even though awareness is immortal. So, God is tricking humans in the Bible to stay perfect in the garden. And Enki tricks Adapa to stay imperfect. It's just flipped, They took the Adapa story and then they flipped it a little bit. So the snake is an Ušumgal who initiates a spiritual awakening, right? The snake tells the truth about the fruit, and inhibits the spiritual/human experience, because it is a spiritual experience to be human innately. So the snake reveals truth. If you have a Kundalini awakening, especially out of nowhere, or like a forced one, I'm not saying I experienced all of these. I don't know. I definitely have one, at least. And I've had some pretty crazy, awakenings where it felt like a literal dragon. I was seeing literal dragons in my vision. And that sounds silly, I'm sure, but it is what it is. So, hey, I'm just making the videos, all right? Hey, don't hurt me. The dragon's telling me to do it. So the snake tells the truth and inhibits the human experience. So Enki is the dragon, right? The great snake. He is inhibiting the human experience within Adapa by tricking Adapa into not becoming immortal. So the snake, the great snake, is still ushering in the human experience within both stories, forcing humanity, forcing the awareness to become human, dualistic, So that means being human is a necessary aspect, a necessary part of gaining higher information, because higher information is just all. So like I said, it has to funnel down in order to keep expanding, to have something to do. If you're just sitting there, everything is, what do? You'll play a video game. You get bored, you play a video game. That's what my generation did. And that's essentially what a human experience is. It's a realistic video game VR, to where we are experiencing source through a 3D dense polarity illusion, dream. It's not fake, but it's not real. So being human is part of the spiritual experience. So Enki, dragon, Ušumgal, forces Adapa to be human, to expand awareness. That's what the snake exactly does in the Bible, and it almost sounds like you can swap the words and it will apply. Ušumgal, snake, forces Adam to be human, to gain awareness, to be like God. Same story. Woo! That's cool. Same story. Snake, spiritual awareness through humanity. So why is there a trick involved? Why does both stories involve a trick? Well, that's cool. I thought that too. A trick. Oh, it's because life is a trick. Reality, quote unquote, is just awareness through consciousness. Just like your dreams at night, you're dreaming this reality right now because you sense everything. If you want to get logical, physical, grounded, you sense everything through the brain, through the mind. All the pain you feel is just a brain sensor. It doesn't mean that there's even anything hitting you. Everything you see in your external is merely your interpretations of light and symbols from the back of your brain. You're not even seeing an external reality. So the trick is that we are living in an illusion, a dream, pretending we are source, the big infinite ocean of source. We are source, funneled down into the human experience in order to expand by remembering our divine, innate divinity, always spiraling down the present one moment, because that's the only moment there is the present moment. That's the trick. We are source, pretending to have souls, pretending to be human, essentially. The trick is the good and evil. That's the trick. Duality is a trick, and I'm not saying it's fake, and I'm also not undermining the fact that we are experiencing it, because like I just said, through Enki, he teaches that you need to experience the human 3D heaviness in order to ascend, quote unquote, by expanding, gaining higher knowledge. So it's all connected, and I love talking about it. I think it's awesome. And when you learn the source of these stories, you will then see that these stories, are just stories. And they're not stories to waste your time. They're stories to help you spiritually advance yourself, but not to enslave you into a God-demanding slave mindset where you have to worship and do all these things to an external source. Like I just explained, it's all internal. So God, Yahweh, Enki, Anu is all within you. And you just have to see it, recognize it, and then start operating, integrating through that awareness. Because you are only awareness at the end of the day. And you're only one awareness. So what you identify with can help play a part into how you experience your awareness. Because you are operating off your belief systems in your subconscious mind, right? Your mind runs off the subconscious, unconscious mind for like 90-something%. We're seeing just a few percent of the conscious mind, right? And the mind also works off symbolism, symbols, not really words. It's beliefs, it's symbols. So if you buy into stories that say that there's a demanding God that's oppressing you, that you gotta, you're building your whole life off that, and that's no hate. But when you see it, when you see the stories from the source, it'll help you integrate source more forcefully. Hey, first episode down. I have fun, but if you stay for this video, that's awesome. I'm going to try not to make them this long because I know some people don't want to invest that long, but I do. Peace, guys. Love you guys. I'll see you next time.